Unaware, his poor abandoned ex is now married to a Korean mafia boss. He kicked her at the mall. "Get out of my way, you useless fool." The shout echoed through Westbridge Mall like a crack of thunder. Shoppers turned, eyes widening as a woman stumbled backward. Her green dress twisted, her handbag clutched to her chest. The man standing over her, tall, broad, white, furious, pointed at her like she was trash on the floor. "You think you can just walk past me?" Ethan Miller roared. "After everything I did for you?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones rose. Whispers followed. She must have done something. But Adiz didn't crumble. Not this time. She looked up at him with eyes that had survived worse, hiding a truth he would never guess. Her new husband wasn't just anyone. He was a Korean mafia boss. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside the mall's glass entrance. Out stepped 4 men in tailored suits, their presence commanding instant silence. The same people who had stared at Adiz with pity now looked at her in shock. This is the story of cruelty, abandonment, and the ultimate reversal of power. What do you think happened the moment Ethan realized who she was married to? Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from and what time it's at your end. Because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. 3 years earlier, Adiz had stepped off the bus at that same station with nothing but a torn bag and a heart fractured by betrayal. No one in the city expected her to survive. And if they had seen her since, they would have expected the same broken woman Ethan abandoned. The one he told everyone was unstable, manipulative, a gold digger who drained him dry. He never told them how he controlled her money, how he isolated her from friends, how he left her at a bus station with no phone and no explanation. Let them think that Adiz had learned. The fewer people who know the truth, the safer my peace stays. Now she walked through Westbridge Mall with her chin level, steady, careful not to draw attention. She didn't want to see anyone from her past yet. She wanted a day to breathe, to shop quietly, to exist without explanation. Her phone buzzed. A simple message from Minjae. "Are you safe?" She smiled before she could stop herself. "Yes. I'm fine. I'll call soon," she replied. He responded with a small heart emoji. Nothing dramatic. Just how he spoke to her. Always soft, never pushing, never loud. He let her choose when the world learned she was Mrs. Adiz. No one here even knew she was married. No one knew her life had changed. And for now she wanted it that way. She reached the clothing section before she felt ready for what came next. The same stores where she used to window shop, back when Ethan said her taste embarrassed him. Now she walked past them with quiet confidence, not needing to prove anything. She picked up a simple scarf, felt the fabric between her fingers. Then she heard it. A familiar laugh, confident, mocking, too loud for the space. Ethan Miller. He rounded the corner of the aisle, his phone against his ear, his smile wide. He didn't see her yet. He was talking to someone, bragging about a business deal, the kind of conversation he always had when he wanted attention. She wanted to walk the other way, but she froze for a second, just long enough for him to turn and spot her. Everything in his face changed. Surprise first, then smug satisfaction. "Well, look what crawled back," he said, hanging up without saying goodbye. He walked toward her with a swagger that made nearby shoppers glance up. Adiz kept her face calm. She didn't want this scene. Not here. Not with strangers watching. Ethan stopped right in front of her, too close. "Didn't expect to see you walking around like everything's normal," he sneered. "Figured you'd still be hiding somewhere, broke and desperate." She said nothing. He smirked. "What's the matter? No comeback today." He stepped even closer, invading her space. "Still weak, huh? That's your problem, Adiz. Still soft. Still nothing." Adiz reached for the space between them and tried to step aside, but he shoved her shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her down, just enough to humiliate her. "Get out of my way, you useless fool. You're nothing." Heads turned. Someone gasped. A mother pulled her child closer. Security hesitated at the edge of the scene. unsure what they were witnessing. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head like he pitied her. You still walk around like you're worth something. It's pathetic. Adiz straightened, calm, still controlled. She refused to bend. She refused to give him one drop of the emotion he craved. He waited for her to break. She didn't. That annoyed him more than anything. Then he lifted his foot and kicked her. The sound of her body hitting the polished marble floor tore through the mall like a wound. A woman screamed. A child began to cry. Phones rose higher, recording everything. Adiz slid across the floor, her shoulder slamming into a storefront glass. Her braids slipped across her face as tears streaked down her cheeks, not from weakness, but from the shock of pain. Ethan stood over her, breathing hard, proud of what he'd done. Look at you, he spat. Still poor. Still nothing. The crowd murmured, unsure, horrified, but no one moved to help. She must have done something to deserve this. Why doesn't she fight back? They say she's his ex. Adiz curled slightly, shielding her ribs. But her eyes weren't filled with fear. They were calculating, listening for something the rest of the mall couldn't hear. Then, the sound came. Low. Heavy. Controlled. The slow approach of footsteps that did not belong to a crowd. Security stiffened. Shoppers turned. A sleek black car had stopped just outside the mall's glass entrance. 4 men stepped inside. Not security, not police. They moved with disciplined precision, dressed in tailored black suits, eyes sharp, expressions unreadable. The crowd parted instinctively, something primal telling them to move aside. 2 of the men, Jizab and Taehyun, scanned the space with cold efficiency. Then they saw Adiz on the floor. Their expressions changed. Behind them walked another man. Tall. Immaculate. Calm in a way that silenced the room without effort. His name was Minjae. And when his eyes landed on Adiz, something dangerous flickered beneath his composed exterior. But to understand how we got here, to this moment of reckoning on a mall floor, we need to go back 3 years. Back to when Adiz had nothing. Back to when Ethan abandoned her and told the world she was unstable. Back to the day she disappeared and met the man who would change everything. 3 years earlier, Adiz had been the woman everyone pitied. The kind of woman people whispered about in grocery store aisles and church parking lots. Did you hear what happened to her? Poor thing. He said she was unstable. Ethan made sure everyone heard his version first. She drained me dry. She's manipulative. A gold digger who wanted my money but gave me nothing but drama. The lies spread like wildfire through their social circle. And by the time Adiz tried to speak, no one believed her. How could they? Ethan was charming, successful, convincing. And she was just the girlfriend who couldn't get her life together. What Ethan never told them was the truth. He never mentioned how he controlled every dollar she earned, insisting she deposit her paychecks into his account for safekeeping. How he isolated her from friends, claiming they were bad influences, who wanted to break them apart. How he monitored her phone, her emails, her movements, always under the guise of care. I'm just protecting you, babe. You're too trusting. When she questioned him, he turned it around. Why are you being paranoid? Are you hiding something? Maybe your friends are right. You are unstable. Gaslighting became his second language. And slowly, Adiz began to believe she was the problem. The day he abandoned her, there was no warning. One morning, Ethan drove her to the bus station with a single torn bag of her belongings. I can't do this anymore, he said flatly, not even looking at her. You're holding me back. Adiz stared at him, confusion and panic rising in her chest. What are you talking about? Ethan, please. Get out, he interrupted. I've already moved your stuff out of the apartment. Don't contact me. Don't embarrass yourself by begging. He handed her $20. $20. After 3 years together. She stood on that curb, watching his car disappear, holding a bag with clothes that didn't fit anymore and a phone he'd already disconnected from the plan. No money. No family willing to help. He'd made sure to poison those relationships too. No explanation except the lie he'd already started spreading. She was unstable. She pushed me away. I had to protect myself. To Ethan, Adiz's disappearance after that day meant one thing. She had failed without him. He imagined her broken, desperate, probably living in some rundown situation, regretting ever losing him. He never wondered if she survived. He never considered that she might have escaped, that someone else might have found her, someone who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. So when Ethan spotted Adiz at Westbridge Mall 3 years later, he felt powerful all over again. There she was, walking alone, modestly dressed, holding a worn handbag. No flashy jewelry. No designer clothes. No signs of the life he assumed she'd never build. To him, she looked exactly like the woman he'd left at that bus station. Still poor. Still nothing. His smile widened as he watched her browse near the clothing section, completely unaware of his presence. History is repeating, he thought. She's still the same pathetic woman. And I'm still the one in control. He didn't see the way she carried herself now. Chin level, shoulders back, movements deliberate and calm. He didn't notice the quiet confidence in her posture, the peace in her expression. And he definitely didn't see the thin wedding band she'd tucked beneath her sleeve that morning, hidden deliberately because she wanted one more day of anonymity before the world learned the truth. Ethan pocketed his phone and started walking toward her, his chest swelling with the familiar thrill of dominance. Time to remind her who she lost. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that the woman standing in front of him wasn't the same person he'd abandoned. Adiz had disappeared 3 years ago. But she hadn't failed. She had been found. And the man who found her was already on his way. Back at Westbridge Mall, Ethan wasn't finished. After shoving Adiz and watching her stumble, he felt the familiar rush of control flooding back. The crowd's shocked faces. The whispers. The phone's recording. Good, he thought. Let them see. He grabbed her arm and yanked her upward, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to bruise. Get up, he snapped. Stop making a scene. Adiz flinched, pain flashing across her face. Please, she said softly. Let me go. That softness, that refusal to fight back the way he wanted, infuriated him even more. Always acting innocent, Ethan spat, tightening his grip. You want people to think I was the problem? That I'm the bad guy? He shoved her backward again, harder this time. Adiz's shoulder hit the edge of a display rack. She caught herself, breathing through the pain, her handbag still clutched against her chest like armor. Phones rose higher in the crowd. Whispers turned sharper, crueler. She must have done something to him. Why isn't she defending herself? They say she's his ex, probably cheated or something. Look how calm she is. Maybe she's used to this. The judgment settled over her like a second skin, familiar and suffocating. She'd heard these voices before, 3 years ago, when Ethan first destroyed her reputation. Back then they had broken her. Now, they were just noise. Ethan circled her slowly, feeding off the attention. You thought you could just walk past me like I don't exist? He said loudly, making sure everyone heard. After everything I gave you? After I saved you from yourself? He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Look at you now. Still broke. Still desperate. Still nothing. A woman in the crowd gasped. A security guard shifted nervously near the entrance but didn't move closer. Overwhelmed, unsure, waiting for someone else to intervene. No one did. Adiz kept her eyes down, not in shame but in focus. Her breathing stayed controlled. Her body curled slightly, shielding her ribs, protecting herself the way she'd learned to in the months after he abandoned her. But her mind wasn't on Ethan. It wasn't on the crowd. It wasn't even on the pain. She was listening. Listening for something the rest of the mall couldn't hear yet. Her phone had buzzed twice in her pocket during Ethan's tirade, short, deliberate vibrations. The kind Minjae used when he was close. He knows, she thought. He's already here. Adiz's chest tightened, not with fear, but with the strange calm that came from knowing she wasn't alone anymore. She didn't need to fight Ethan herself. She didn't need to scream or beg or explain. She just needed to wait. Ethan grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. Say something, he hissed. Admit you were wrong. Admit you needed me. Adiz met his eyes, her voice steady and quiet. I don't need you anymore, Ethan. His face twisted with rage. He lifted his hand. Then the sound came. Low. Heavy. Controlled. Footsteps. Not the hurried shuffle of shoppers or the rubber-soled squeaks of mall security. These were deliberate, measured, the kind of footsteps that carried weight beyond the physical. The murmur of the crowd began to fade. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even Ethan paused, his hand still raised, confusion flickering across his face. People turned toward the mall entrance, their expressions shifting from curiosity to unease. The glass doors slid open. 4 men stepped inside. Not security. Not police. They wore tailored black suits that fit like armor. Their faces were unreadable, their movements synchronized with the kind of discipline that came from years of training. 2 of them, Jizab and Taehyun, scanned the mall with sharp, calculating eyes. When they spotted Adiz on the floor, something shifted in their posture. The air itself seemed to tighten. Behind them, another man entered. Tall. Immaculate. His presence commanded silence without a single word. Minjae. The crowd parted instinctively. Not because anyone told them to. Not because they understood who these men were. But because something primal in them recognized authority that didn't need to announce itself. Shoppers stepped back, pulling children closer, lowering their phones. Even Ethan, still standing over Adiz with his fist half raised, felt it. The shift. The weight of something bigger than his cruelty entering the space. He turned slowly toward the entrance, his confidence beginning to crack. And Adiz, still on the floor, looked up. Not at Ethan. At Minjae. Her husband had arrived. The black luxury car sat idling outside the mall entrance like a panther waiting to strike. Sleek. Tinted windows. Engine purring so quietly it barely registered above the hum of shoppers and holiday music. But it was impossible to ignore. Passers-by slowed their steps. A security guard near the parking lot straightened, instinctively uneasy. Something about the vehicle felt wrong. Not threatening in an obvious way, but wrong in the way apex predators feel wrong when they enter a space that isn't theirs. The doors opened. Jizab stepped out first. Mid-30s. Sharp jawline. Eyes that swept the environment with the efficiency of someone trained to assess threats in seconds. His suit was immaculate, tailored perfectly, no wrinkles, no unnecessary accessories. He moved with the kind of economy that suggested every motion had purpose. Taehyun followed. Taller, broader, quieter. His expression was unreadable, but his hands stayed loose at his sides, ready. Always ready. He scanned the crowd like he was reading a map only he could see, cataloging faces, exits, blind spots. Neither man ran. Neither man hurried. They simply moved, with the kind of disciplined precision that made people step aside without understanding why. Inside the mall, their entrance rippled through the space like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations faltered. Shoppers turned. Even the holiday music seemed to dim under the weight of their presence. Jizab's eyes locked onto the scene immediately. A woman on the floor, a man standing over her. A crowd frozen in uncomfortable voyeurism. His expression didn't change. But Taehyun's jaw tightened. They moved closer, cutting through the crowd with silent authority. People parted instinctively, some pulling children back, others lowering their phones as if recording suddenly felt dangerous. When Jizab saw Adiz's face, the tears, the twisted dress, the way she held her ribs protectively, his hand flexed briefly at his side. Taehyun exhaled slowly through his nose, the only visible sign of the rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. They stopped 10 feet away, waiting. Then the last man entered. The crowd felt him before they saw him. A shift in the air. A silence that wasn't absence of sound but presence of something heavier. Minjae. He walked through the mall entrance with the kind of stillness that made motion unnecessary. No hurry. No urgency. Just deliberate, measured steps that suggested he had all the time in the world. And everyone else would wait. Tall. Immaculate. His suit was darker than his men's, perfectly tailored, not a thread out of place. His hair was styled back, his face composed in a way that revealed nothing and promised everything. But it was his eyes that made people step back. Calm. Cold. Dangerous in their restraint. The kind of eyes that had seen violence and chosen mercy, but only when it suited him. His gaze swept the mall once, cataloging everything. The crowd, the security guards frozen near the escalators, the phone still recording. Then his eyes found Adiz. And everything else ceased to matter. The dangerous calm in his expression flickered, just for a moment, replaced by something softer, something that looked like concern wrapped in fury. He stopped a few steps away from her, close enough that she could hear him clearly. Adiz. One word. Her name. Not a question. Not a command. Just her name, spoken with a gentleness that didn't belong in this space, in this moment, surrounded by cruelty and judgment. It was the kind of gentleness Ethan had never used. The kind that didn't demand or control. The kind that simply saw her. Adiz looked up, tears still streaking her cheeks, and whispered, "It's okay. I'm all right." The words were automatic. Years of survival training her to minimize, to soothe, to make herself smaller so others wouldn't escalate. But Min-jae heard what she didn't say. He saw the bruise forming on her shoulder, the way she held her ribs, the tremor in her hands. Jizab and Taehyun shifted behind him, their expressions hardening. Ethan, still standing over Adiz, still riding the high of his own cruelty, scoffed loudly. "Who the hell are you people?" he demanded, voice dripping with mockery. Min-jae didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him, didn't waste a single breath on him. Instead, he moved forward with that same deliberate calm, unbuttoning his jacket as he walked. He knelt beside Adiz, slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might hurt her further. Then he draped his jacket over her shoulders, covering her torn dress, shielding her from the crowd's stares. His voice was quiet, controlled. "My wife," he said, each word precise, "is bleeding." The word wife dropped into the mall like a detonation. Silence exploded outward. And for the first time since this began, Ethan's smug expression cracked. Ethan stared at the jacket draped over Adiz's shoulders, then at the man kneeling beside her, then at the two suited men standing like sentries behind him. And he laughed. Loud. Mocking. The kind of laugh designed to humiliate. "Your wife," Ethan repeated, pointing at Adiz like she was a punchline. "This woman? Her." He shook his head, grinning at the absurdity. "She's nothing. A broke, desperate leech who couldn't even keep herself together after I left her." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some people frowning now, others watching with growing unease. Ethan's confidence swelled. He was performing again, feeding off the attention. "Nice try, man. I don't know what sob story she fed you, but trust me, she's playing you. That's what she does. She manipulates, she lies, she." "My wife is bleeding." Minji's voice cut through Ethan's rant like a blade through silk. Quiet. Controlled. Absolute. Not a shout. Not a threat. Just a statement of fact delivered with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. The mall fell silent. No shuffling feet. No whispered conversations. No crying children. Just silence. Thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Min-jae hadn't moved from his position beside Adiz. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, steadying her, grounding her. His eyes never left her face as he carefully checked the bruise forming near her collarbone, the scrape on her arm where she'd hit the glass. "You're hurt," he said softly to her, his tone so different from the coldness he'd used with Ethan. "Where else?" Adiz shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm okay." "Really?" "No," Min-jae said gently. "You're not." He looked up then, not at Ethan but at Jizab. Jizab pulled out his phone immediately, typing rapidly. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out," he said. "Medical team standing by." Taehyun stepped forward slightly, his voice low. "Security footage is already secured. Witnesses confirmed. We have everything." Ethan's laugh died in his throat. He looked between the three men, his smile faltering for the first time. "Wait. What is this?" His voice lost its edge. "Who are you people?" Min-jae stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from his pants. When he finally turned to face Ethan, the temperature in the mall seemed to drop. "You kicked her," Min-jae said, his voice still calm, still controlled. "In public. In front of witnesses." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Jizab held up his phone, showing the screen to the crowd. "Mall cameras. 3 angles. Clear footage." Taehyun added. "And several bystander recordings. Already secured." The security guards near the escalator stiffened, suddenly very aware they'd done nothing to intervene. Ethan's face drained of color. I know he stammered. She provoked me. She was shopping, Min-jae interrupted, his tone sharp now precise. Walking through a public space. Minding her business. He took one step closer. You grabbed her. Shoved her. Verbally abused her. Another step. And then you kicked her. Ethan backed up instinctively, his bravado crumbling. Look man, I don't know what she told you but she didn't tell me anything, Min-jae said. I saw it myself. The crowd murmured, phones rising again. But this time, they weren't recording Adi's humiliation. They were recording Ethan's unraveling. A woman near the front of the crowd spoke up, her voice shaking. I saw it too, she said. He attacked her for no reason. She didn't do anything. An older man nodded. He grabbed her first. She tried to walk away. Another voice. She asked him to stop. Multiple times. The tide was turning. The same people who had judged Adi's moments ago were now bearing witness against Ethan. Ethan's hands trembled. This is insane, he muttered. She's nobody. She is my wife, Min-jae repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous. And you put your hands on her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The word wife hung in the air like a verdict. Undeniable, final, loaded with implications Ethan was only beginning to understand. Jizub and Taehyun moved slightly, flanking Min-jae on either side. Their presence alone made it clear. This wasn't a negotiation. The crowd stared. Not at Adiz anymore. At her. The woman they'd pitted. The woman they'd judged. The woman who was married to a man who commanded a room without raising his voice, who moved with the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. Whispers began again, but different now. Who is he? Did you see those men? She's his wife. Look at how he's protecting her. The shift was complete. Adiz wasn't the victim they'd ignored. She was the wife of someone they instinctively feared. And Ethan, standing in the center of it all, finally understood. He hadn't just kicked his ex-girlfriend. He'd assaulted the wife of a man whose silence was more terrifying than any threat. The realization hit him like cold water. His knees buckled slightly. And the mall stayed silent, waiting for what came next. Ethan tried to laugh again, but it came out hollow. Okay, look, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. This is all a big misunderstanding. We have history. Things got heated. It happens. He forced a smile, trying to reclaim the narrative. I'll apologize, all right? We'll all just walk away and... No. Minji's voice was quiet. Final. Ethan blinked. What? You won't walk away, Min-jae said, his tone unchanged. Not from this. Jizub stepped forward, holding his phone up so Ethan could see the screen. 3 camera angles from mall security, he said matter-of-factly, swiping through the footage. Timestamped. Audio included. He turned the phone toward the crowd. Clear evidence of verbal assault, physical assault, and battery. Ethan's face paled. You can't just. 6 witness statements, Jizub continued, not pausing. Already collected and documented. 4 of them recorded their own video, all corroborating the same sequence of events. He pocketed his phone smoothly. Would you like to hear what they said about you? Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Taehyun moved forward next, his presence larger, more imposing. He didn't pull out a phone. He pulled out a folder. Thick. Organized. Official-looking. Financial records, Taehyun said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of something colder. Dating back 3 years. Ethan's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Bank accounts opened in Adi's name without her knowledge, Taehyun continued, flipping through pages with clinical precision. Credit cards she never signed for. Loans taken out using her information. He looked up, his gaze piercing. You controlled her money, isolated her financially, then abandoned her with nothing. The crowd murmured, shock rippling through the space. Ethan shook his head frantically. That's not. She had access to everything. She had access to nothing, Taehyun corrected. You made sure of that. Jizub added almost casually. We've been investigating you for 18 months. The words landed like a hammer. Ethan staggered back a step. Investigating? What the hell? Why would you? Because she asked us to, Min-jae said quietly. All eyes turned to him. He stood there, still calm, still composed, but there was something beneath the surface now. Something dangerous that he was choosing to restrain. When Adiz came to me 3 years ago, Min-jae continued, his voice soft but carrying through the silent mall, she had nothing. No money. No phone. No identification. Because you took it all. Ethan's breathing quickened. She was alone at a bus station, Min-jae said. Crying. Broken. Convinced she was worthless. He took one step closer, and Ethan instinctively backed up. You did that to her. The crowd was transfixed. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the security guards stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the way. Minji's voice dropped lower, more intimate, meant only for Ethan but loud enough for everyone to hear. You abandoned her when she had nothing, he said. You thought she disappeared because she failed. A pause. Heavy. Deliberate. She disappeared because I found her. The realization crashed over Ethan like a wave. This wasn't just a rich husband. This wasn't some businessman who got lucky. The way these men moved. The way they spoke. The 18-month investigation. The surveillance. The control. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Ethan's hands trembled. Who are you? Min-jae tilted his head slightly, studying him like a scientist observing an insect. Someone who protects what's mine, he said simply. Behind him, Jizab and Taehyun stood like pillars, silent, immovable, radiating barely restrained violence. Ethan's knees buckled slightly. He looked around desperately, at the crowd, at security, at anyone who might help him. But no one moved. The shoppers who had judged Adiz moments ago now looked at Ethan with something between pity and disgust. The security guards avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in their radios. Even the air itself felt hostile. This is insane, Ethan whispered. You can't do this. This is America. There are laws. Yes, Min-jae agreed. There are. He nodded once. Jizab stepped forward and handed a folder to one of the security guards, who took it with shaking hands. Civil charges for financial abuse, Jizab said clearly. Criminal charges for assault and battery, documented today. Taehyun added. And a restraining order, effective immediately. Ethan stared at the folder in the guard's hands. Everything he'd done, every lie he'd told, every manipulation, every cruel word, was documented. Proven. Undeniable. His control was gone. His power was gone. And the woman he thought he'd destroyed forever was standing behind a man who moved through the world like he owned it. Min-jae turned away from Ethan as if he no longer existed, kneeling beside Adiz again. Can you stand? He asked gently. Adiz nodded, taking his offered hand. As she rose slowly, carefully, with Min-jae supporting her, the crowd watched in silence. She wasn't broken. She had never been broken. And Ethan, standing alone in the center of the mall, finally understood. He had lost. Completely. The silence stretched. Ethan opened his mouth one last time, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to say. No control left to seize. No narrative left to spin. Just the weight of his actions. And the man who had come to collect the debt. Adiz stood fully now, Minji's jacket still draped over her shoulders. The crowd expected her to stay silent, to let the men handle everything, to remain the victim they'd pitted. But when she spoke, her voice was steady, clear, unbroken. You sold my things after you left, she said, looking directly at Ethan. The mall went silent again. Ethan's face twisted. What? I never. My grandmother's jewelry, Adiz continued, her voice gaining strength. The necklace she gave me before she died. You said you'd keep it safe. She paused, letting the words settle. You sold it 3 days after you abandoned me. For $800. A woman in the crowd gasped. Ethan shook his head frantically. That's not true. You're making this up. The laptop I used for my freelance work, Adiz went on, ignoring him. The one I paid for with my own money. You sold that too. Her eyes never left his face. You opened credit cards in my name. Maxed them out. Left me with $15,000 in debt I didn't know existed until collectors started calling. The crowd murmured louder now. Phones stayed raised, recording every word. Ethan's voice climbed higher, desperate. She's lying. All of this is bank statements, Taehyun interjected calmly, holding up another page from his folder. Transaction records. Email confirmations. All in your name, Mr. Miller. He handed copies to the security guards. She didn't know about any of it until the collections agencies found her, Taehyun continued. By then her credit was destroyed. Jizab added. We also have documentation of harassment. You contacted her former employers with false accusations. Cost her 3 job opportunities in 6 months. Ethan stumbled backward, his face flushed. This is insane, he shouted. You people can't just. She's manipulating all of you. That's what she does. He pointed at Adiz, his hand shaking. She told people I was abusive. She turned everyone against me when I was the one who supported her worthless. Enough. Minji's voice cut through Ethan's tirade like a blade. One word. Spoken quietly. But the authority in it was absolute. The entire mall fell silent. Not because he shouted, but because something in his tone made it impossible to speak. Minjae raised one hand, a simple gesture. Jizab and Taehyun moved immediately, positioning themselves on either side of Ethan, not touching him, but close enough that running wasn't an option. We didn't come here to punish you, Minjae said, his voice returning to that dangerous calm. That's not our place. He nodded once. Jizab handed another folder to a security supervisor who had finally approached, flanked by 2 uniformed mall cops. Civil charges for financial fraud and identity theft, Jizab said, his tone professional. Criminal charges for assault and battery, documented today with video evidence and witness testimony. Taehyun added, and a formal complaint for harassment and defamation spanning 3 years. The security supervisor opened the folder, eyes widening as he flipped through page after page of documentation. This is... He trailed off, looking up at Ethan. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us. Ethan's face crumbled. No, he whispered. No, this isn't. You can't do this to me. You did this to yourself, Adiz said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry, wasn't triumphant, just tired. Ethan turned to her, his expression desperate now. Adiz, please. You know me. We were together for 3 years. You can't let them. You left me at a bus station with nothing, she said, her voice breaking slightly. You told everyone I was unstable, so they wouldn't believe me when I tried to tell the truth. She stepped closer, Minjae staying at her side. You controlled my money, isolated me from my friends, made me believe I was the problem. Tears formed in her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. And when you saw me today, after 3 years, you kicked me. In public. Because you still thought I was nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Ethan had no response. The security guards moved in, 2 of them flanking him. Sir, we need you to come with us now, one of them said firmly. Police are on their way. Ethan's legs gave out. He didn't collapse completely, but he sagged, held up only by the guards gripping his arms. This can't be happening, he muttered. This isn't real. But the cameras were still flashing. The phones were still recording. And the evidence was irrefutable. As the guards began escorting him toward the security office, Ethan looked back one last time. Not at Minjae. Not at Jizab or Taehyun. At Adiz. Standing tall. Wrapped in her husband's jacket. Surrounded by men who would protect her the way he never did. You were nothing, he whispered. One last desperate attempt to wound her. Adiz met his eyes. I survived you, she said simply. That's more than nothing. The guards pulled him away. His protests faded as they disappeared into the back hallway, heading toward offices where police were already arriving. The crowd slowly began to disperse, some still recording, others whispering to each other about what they'd just witnessed. But many stayed, watching Adiz, watching Minjae, watching the woman who had been kicked on a mall floor stand beside a man whose very presence rewrote the rules. And in that moment, everyone understood. The woman they had pitted was never weak. She had just been waiting for the right moment to speak. Adiz stood in the center of the mall, breathing. Just breathing. The chaos around her. The whispers, the cameras, the security guards rushing past, felt distant, like she was watching it happen to someone else. But she wasn't someone else anymore. She was herself. Fully. Finally. Minji's hand rested gently on her lower back, a quiet presence of support. But he wasn't holding her up. She was standing on her own. The crowd had changed. The same people who had watched her get kicked, who had whispered cruel judgments and pulled out their phones to record her humiliation. They looked at her differently now. Not with pity. Not with scorn. With something else. Respect. Curiosity. Even a hint of awe. A young woman near the edge of the crowd stepped forward hesitantly. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "Do you need anything?" Adiz blinked, surprised by the kindness. "I'm all right," she said. "Thank you." The woman nodded and stepped back, but her eyes stayed on Adiz, not staring but seeing her. Others began to approach. An older man offered her a bottle of water. A mother with 2 children asked if she needed a place to sit. The shift was complete. She was no longer the victim they ignored. She was the woman who survived. Inside, Adiz felt something crack open. Not breaking. Opening. 3 years ago, she had begged Ethan not to leave her at that bus station. She had pleaded, cried, made herself smaller, hoped that if she just apologized enough, for things she didn't even do, he might change his mind. He didn't. And she spent months after that believing his lies. Believing she was unstable. Manipulative. Worthless. But standing here now, wrapped in Minji's jacket, surrounded by people who finally saw her as human, she understood something profound. She had never been those things. She had been abused. And survival wasn't weakness. It was strength. Minjae leaned closer, his voice meant only for her. "Are you ready to go home?" The question was simple. Gentle. No pressure behind it. Adiz looked around the mall one last time. At the stores where she used to window shop, dreaming of a life she thought she'd never have. At the people who had watched her fall and done nothing. Until they realized she wasn't alone. At the polished marble floor where Ethan's cruelty had tried to break her one final time. She had spent 3 years hiding. Rebuilding herself quietly, privately. Afraid that if anyone knew the truth, they'd use it against her the way Ethan had. But silence hadn't protected her. It had only isolated her. She turned to Minjae, her voice steady. "Yes," she said softly. "But this time I won't be silent." Something flickered in Minji's eyes. Pride maybe, or understanding. He squeezed her hand gently. "Good," he said. "You shouldn't be." Jizab and Taehyun moved to flank them, creating a protective barrier as they began walking toward the exit. The crowd parted without being asked. Some people nodded as Adiz passed. Others simply watched, their expressions thoughtful, like they were reconsidering everything they'd witnessed. A teenage girl called out, "You're really brave." Adiz paused, turning slightly. The girl looked nervous but sincere. "Thank you," Adiz said, her voice warm. "So are you." The girl's face lit up. As they reached the mall entrance, Adiz felt the weight of the last 3 years begin to lift. Not all of it. Trauma didn't disappear just because justice arrived. But enough. Enough to breathe easier. Enough to walk with her head up. Enough to believe that speaking her truth wouldn't destroy her. Minjae opened the car door for her, but before she stepped inside, she looked back one more time. The mall buzzed with activity again. Shoppers returning to their routines, stores reopening, life continuing. But she knew something had shifted. Not just for her. For everyone who had witnessed what happened. They had seen a woman get kicked and humiliated. But they had also seen her stand back up, speak her truth, and walk away with dignity intact. Adiz slid into the car, Minjae settling beside her. Jizab took the driver's seat. Taehyun sat in front, already on his phone coordinating next steps. The door closed, muffling the noise of the mall. Silence filled the car, but it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Minjae reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You did well," he said quietly. Adiz leaned her head against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "I'm tired of hiding," she whispered. "Then don't," Minjae said simply. "Not anymore." The car pulled away from Westbridge Mall, gliding smoothly into traffic. Through the tinted windows, Adiz watched the building disappear behind them, The place where her past had tried to reclaim her, to drag her back into shame and silence. But she wasn't going back. Not to that life. Not to that version of herself. She was moving forward. With a man who saw her worth when she couldn't. With a voice she was finally ready to use. And with a story that was far from over. Min-jae squeezed her hand once more. "Let's go home," he said. Adiz closed her eyes, a small smile forming. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's go home." And as the car disappeared into the city, the woman who had once been abandoned at a bus station with nothing, drove away with everything. By evening, Ethan Miller's name was everywhere. Not in the way he'd always wanted, praised, admired, respected, but plastered across local news sites, social media feeds, and community forums with words like assault, fraud, and abuser attached to it. Local man arrested for mall assault. Financial fraud victim speaks out after years of abuse. Shocking video shows public attack on woman. Husband's identity raises questions. The videos spread fast. Ethan standing over Adiz, his foot connecting with her body. The moment 4 men in black suits entered the mall like they owned it. And most viral of all, Min-jae kneeling beside his wife, draping his jacket over her shoulders, saying those 3 words that broke the internet. "My wife is bleeding." Comments flooded in by the thousands. Who is that man? He moves like he's dangerous. The way he protected her. I'm crying. That ex thought he was untouchable. He learned today. Okay, but who is the husband? Those men aren't normal security. But alongside the support came something else. Whispers. Speculation. Questions no one could quite answer. Why did those men move like that? Since when do regular people have 18 months of investigation files ready? That's not just money. That's power. I heard he's connected to something big. Something dangerous. The name Min-jae started circulating in corners of the internet where people traded rumors about organized networks, international business dealings, and families whose influence stretched beyond what was legal. Someone claimed to recognize Jizub from a high-profile security detail in Seoul. Another swore they'd seen Taehyun's face in archived photos from a corporate takedown that never made it to trial. The threads multiplied. And with every share, every screenshot, every theory, Adiz's face appeared alongside Min-jae's. At home, Adiz sat by the window scrolling through her phone. Messages poured in from people she hadn't spoken to in years. "Adiz, is that really you? I always knew Ethan was lying about you. Can we talk? I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." She didn't respond to most of them. The apologies felt hollow now. Offered only because she had proof, only because someone powerful stood beside her. Where were these people when she needed them 3 years ago? Min-jae entered the room quietly, setting a cup of tea on the table beside her. "You should rest," he said gently. Adiz looked up at him. "It's not over, is it?" Min-jae's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "No," he admitted. "It's not." She had known, of course. From the moment those men stepped into the mall with Min-jae, she had known this would draw attention. The kind of attention that asked dangerous questions. Who is he? What does he do? Why does he move through the world like laws don't apply to him? Adiz set her phone down. "People are asking about you. About us." "Let them ask," Min-jae said calmly. "They won't find answers they can use." But Adiz knew better. There were always people watching. Always people waiting for weakness. Always enemies hidden in shadows looking for leverage. And now she, the woman married to Min-jae, was visible. Exposed. A target. Min-jae sat beside her, his hand finding hers. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. Adiz thought about it. 3 years ago, she would have said yes immediately. Fear had controlled so much of her life back then. Fear of Ethan's anger, fear of judgment, fear of being alone. But now? "No," she said finally. "Not afraid." She looked at him, her voice steady. "But I know this comes with a cost." Min-jae's jaw tightened slightly. "It does. And I know people will come for us," she continued. "People who see me as a weakness. A way to hurt you." "They'll try," Min-jae said, his voice edged with something cold. "They'll fail." Adiz leaned against him, exhaustion settling into her bones. Outside, the city hummed with life. People going about their evenings, unaware that somewhere in the digital ether, a story was building momentum. A story about a woman who survived, a man whose power no one fully understood, and consequences that were only beginning to unfold. What happens next? Adiz whispered. Min-jae pressed a kiss to the top of her head. We protect what's ours, he said simply. No matter what it takes. Across the city, in a holding cell, Ethan Miller sat alone. His lawyer had already told him the charges were serious. The evidence overwhelming. The public outrage growing. But what terrified him most wasn't the legal consequences. It was the memory of Minji's eyes. The way he had looked at Ethan, not with anger, but with the cold certainty of someone who knew how to make people disappear. Ethan's hands shook. He had kicked the wrong woman. And the man who came for her wasn't someone you walked away from. Back at the window, Adiz stared out at the darkening sky. She thought about the bus station 3 years ago. The despair. The emptiness. She thought about the woman she had been. Silent, broken, convinced she deserved the cruelty Ethan inflicted. And she thought about the woman she was now. Standing. Speaking. Refusing to be small. The woman they thought was broken had only been waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The right strength. The right voice. And now that she had found it, she wouldn't let it go. No matter what came next. Minji's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening slightly. Jizub's message was brief. Movement detected. They know. Min-jae deleted the message and stood. Get some rest, he told Adiz. Tomorrow will be different. She watched him leave the room, already making calls, already preparing. And she understood. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. To be continued.